Mother Tiger begs. Humans to save her cub. Trapped in quicksand. Then a miracle happened. The mist sat low over the Cavalli Wetland Reserve, thick as smoke, when Mia Alvarez steered her jeep along the winding dirt track that traced the edge of the marsh. Dawn had barely broken. The sky was a bruised gray, streaked with the first weak lines of orange, and the air smelled like wet grass and river mud. She drove with one hand on the wheel, the other resting on the radio, out of habit more than need. Nobody called this early. Nobody but her was awake at this hour, which was exactly how she liked it. The reserve was quiet in a way that felt earned, like the whole world had agreed to leave her alone for just a little while. Mia had been doing dawn patrol for 2 years now, ever since Danny. She didn't let herself think his name much anymore, not without flinching. But some mornings it crept up on her anyway, riding in on the smell of wet earth and river water. She pushed it down the way she always did, tightening her grip on the wheel, focusing on the ruts in the road, the shapes of the trees sliding past in the gray light. Before you continue listening, please let me know where in the world are you watching from today? Now back to the story. The jeep rattled to a stop near the marshy delta, where the river widened and slowed, spreading into a maze of mudflats and reed beds. Mia climbed out, boots sinking slightly into the damp earth, and grabbed her pack from the passenger seat. She checked her watch. 6:15. Plenty of time to walk the Delta line before the heat came up and the bugs got bad. She had barely taken 10 steps toward the water when she heard it. A roar, low and rough, tore through the mist. It wasn't like the roars she'd heard tigers make before, the deep territorial calls that echoed for miles, confident and slow. This was different. Ragged. Frantic. It cracked in the middle, breaking into something almost like a scream, and it sent a jolt straight through Mia's chest. She froze, every muscle in her body going still and alert. The sound came again, closer this time, and beneath it, she heard something else. A higher-pitched cry, weaker, almost swallowed by the mist. An animal in distress. Maybe more than one. Mia's training kicked in before her fear could. She reached for the radio at her hip, but didn't key it yet. Not until she knew what she was dealing with. She moved forward, low and quiet, following the sound through the reeds, her boots squelching in the soft ground. The mist clung to her skin, cool and damp, and her heart pounded harder with every step. The roaring came again, closer now, desperate, and Mia's mind raced through every possibility. A territorial fight, an injured animal, a predator caught in a snare. She had seen plenty of hard things in her years at the reserve, and she braced herself for whatever waited on the other side of the ridge ahead of her. She climbed the muddy slope, gripping at reeds and roots to keep her footing, her breath coming quick and shallow. The sound was very near now, echoing off the low ridge, raw and full of something that sounded almost human in its pain. She had never heard an animal cry like that before. It scared her more than any roar of aggression ever could. At the top of the ridge, she stopped. Below her, the land dropped away into a wide, gray mudflat, the kind the rangers all knew to avoid, soft ground that could swallow a grown man whole if he wasn't careful. And there, pacing along the edge of it, back and forth, was a tigress. Mia recognized her instantly. Ronnie. The collar tag glinted faintly at her neck even in the dim light. The same tag Joseph had placed there years ago. But it wasn't Ronnie's pacing that stopped Mia's heart. It was what lay in the mud before her. A small cub, sunk chest deep in the quicksand, thrashing weakly against the mud that held it fast. Its cries, the same high, desperate sound Mia had heard from the ridge, were growing fainter with every passing second, its strength fading as the mud pulled it down. Mia dropped low behind a screen of reeds, her pulse slamming against her ribs. Every instinct told her to back away, to radio for help, and wait at a safe distance the way her training demanded. You did not approach a tiger. You did not get near a mother tiger with a cub in danger. That was Rule 1, drilled into her from her very first week at the reserve. But the cub's cries were growing weaker. She watched Ronnie pace the edge of the mud flat, her huge paws sinking slightly with each step, her head swinging low and her ears flat against her skull. The tigress let out another one of those broken roars, and this time Mia heard the fear in it clearly. Not rage. Fear. Okay, Mia whispered to herself, barely a breath of sound. Okay, think. Her hand found the radio at her hip, and she thumbed it on, keeping her voice as low and steady as she could manage. Base, this is Alvarez. I've got a tiger cub stuck in QuickSand at the North Delta Flat near Marker 9. Mother is present and highly distressed, requesting immediate backup, rope gear, and Joseph if he's near a radio. The reply crackled back, Priya's voice thick with sleep and sudden alarm. Copy that, Mia. Sending Joseph and Sam now. 15 minutes, maybe less. Do not approach the tiger. Copy, Mia said, though the word tasted hollow in her mouth. 15 minutes might be too long. She could already see the mud creeping higher on the cub's small body, could hear its cry growing thinner, more ragged, like a candle flame about to gut her out. Ronnie paced faster now, swinging her head between the cub and the tree line, and once, terrifyingly, toward Mia's hiding spot in the reeds. Mia's whole body went rigid. She held her breath, waiting for the tigress to charge, waiting for teeth and claws and the kind of ending she'd read about in field reports, the kind rangers whispered about around the campfire. But Ronnie didn't charge. Instead, the tigress went still, her amber eyes, wide and wild, fixed directly on the reeds where Mia crouched. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The mist swirled between them, thinning in patches, and Mia felt exposed, as if the tigress could see straight through the reeds to the fear pounding in her chest. She thought of Danny then, unbidden, the way he used to talk about animals when they were kids. He'd always been the gentle one, the one who cried over hurt birds and buried dead beetles in the backyard with tiny cardboard tombstones. Animals ask for help too, Mia, he'd told her once, when she was maybe 10 and he was 8, holding a wounded sparrow in his cupped hands. You just gotta know how to listen. She'd laughed at him back then. She wasn't laughing now. Ronnie's ears twitched, and she let out another sound, but this one was different. Lower. Almost like a moan, stretched thin and pleading. The cub's struggles were slowing in the mud, its small head barely staying above the surface now, and something in Mia's chest cracked open at the sight of it. Some old wound she thought had scarred over long ago. She rose slightly from her crouch, just enough to be seen clearly through the thinning mist, her hands open and empty at her sides, showing the tigress she carried no weapon, no threat. It was instinct more than training, some old and quiet part of her that remembered what Danny used to say. Ronnie's eyes locked onto hers. For 3 long seconds, neither of them looked away. Mia felt the weight of that gaze settle into her bones, something ancient and unspoken passing between them, mother to mother, grief to grief, though Mia had no children of her own to lose. She only had a brother, and the water had taken him just like the mud was trying to take this cub. Then, slowly, deliberately, Ronnie took a step backward. And another. She moved away from the mud flat, away from her own cub, putting several feet of distance between herself and the sinking creature, her massive body low and tense, but no longer pacing. She let out a low whine, soft and broken, and Mia felt her breath catch in her throat. It wasn't a threat. It was a plea. Mia's hand shook as she pressed the radio button again. "Base, this is Alvarez. Do you copy?" Static, then Priya's voice, sharper now, fully awake. "Copy, Mia. Go ahead. The cub is going under fast. I need planks, rope, and every hand you can spare. Tell Joseph to bring the tranquilizer kit just in case, but tell him not to use it unless things go bad. The mother is right here and she's not aggressive. I repeat, she is not aggressive. She backed off on her own." There was a pause on the other end, long enough that Mia wondered if the signal had dropped. Then Priya's voice again, careful. "You're saying the tiger let you get close?" "I'm saying she's asking for help," Mia said. And even as the words left her mouth, she heard how strange they sounded, how much like something Danny would have said. "Just get here, fast. On our way. Sam and Joseph left 2 minutes ago. Hang tight." Mia clipped the radio back to her belt and turned her eyes back to the mud flat. The mist had thinned enough now that she could see the whole scene laid out before her like something from a nightmare. The cub was barely moving, its small head tipped back, nostrils working hard to stay above the surface of the wet, sucking ground. Every few seconds, a tiny whimper rose from its throat, and each time, Ronnie's whole body flinched like she'd been struck. 15 minutes. That was what Priya said. 15 minutes might as well have been a lifetime for a creature that small. Mia's mind raced through everything she knew about QuickSand and mud flats from her training. The stuff wasn't like the movies, not exactly. It didn't swallow a person whole in seconds. But a small body, a cub with soft bones and delicate lungs, could tire fast, could slip under before anyone arrived with rope and planks. Every minute mattered. Every second the cub spent thrashing pulled him down deeper, packed the mud tighter around his little chest. She looked at the tree line, searching for a branch, anything long enough to test the ground without stepping onto it herself. There, half-rotted but sturdy enough, a fallen limb from an old fig tree lay tangled in the reeds nearby. Mia crept toward it, keeping her movements slow and deliberate, aware every second of the tigress watching her from the edge of the flat. Ronnie hadn't moved from her spot. She stood rigid, ears pinned, tail flicking low and tense against the mud, her whole body a coiled question mark aimed at Mia. Waiting. Watching. It was the strangest feeling Mia had ever known, being watched like that by something so powerful, so capable of ending her life in one swipe, and yet feeling no less safe than she had in her own kitchen that morning. She picked up the branch, testing its weight in her hands. It was heavier than it looked, solid despite the rot creeping along one end. Good. It would hold. Mia moved to the rim of the mud flat, slow and careful, her boots sinking slightly into the softer ground at the very edge. She crouched and reached out with the branch, pressing its tip into the mud a few feet ahead of her, testing how deep it sank before she dared put any weight of her own near that spot. The branch went down easy, sliding through the mud like it was nothing more than wet sand, and Mia's stomach turned cold at how little resistance it met. She shifted a few feet to the side, tried again. Same result. The whole flat was soft, unstable, a trap waiting to close around anyone who stepped too far without knowing where the solid ground ended and the danger began. Ronnie let out a low sound, almost a growl, but softer, quieter, and Mia froze, glancing up. The tigress hadn't moved, but her eyes were locked on Mia's hands, on the branch, on every small motion Mia made near the mud. It wasn't a warning. It was something closer to hope, raw and desperate, held together by nothing but silence and trust. Neither of them fully understood. Mia swallowed hard and pressed the branch into the ground again, testing, searching, inch by careful inch, while the tigress stood watch over her, unmoving, and the cub's cries grew thinner in the mist. Old Joseph came through the reeds first, moving faster than a man his age had any business moving, his medical bag banging against his hip with every stride. Behind him, Priya sprinted with a coil of rope over one shoulder, her sandals slapping against the wet ground, her breath coming in short, sharp gasps. "Mia!" Joseph called out, his voice cutting through the mist. "Where is she?" Mia raised her hand without turning, still crouched at the edge of the mud flat with the branch gripped tight. "Here, cub's still going under. Mother's right beside me. She hasn't moved in 10 minutes. Joseph slowed as he came into view of the flat, his eyes going wide at the sight of Ronnie standing so close, so still, so clearly watching every human movement with an intensity that made the hair on his arms stand up. He'd known this tigress for years, had put the tag in her ear himself back when she was barely more than a cub herself. He had never once seen her stand her ground like this. "Well, I'll be," he muttered, setting his bag down carefully in the mud. "She really is just standing there." "Told you," Mia said. Priya arrived a second later, nearly stumbling over a root as she came to a stop beside Joseph. She dropped the rope coil onto the drier ground and pressed a hand to her chest, catching her breath. "The planks are coming. 2 of the men from the village are carrying them. They weren't far behind me." As if summoned by her words, the sound of footsteps and heavy breathing rose from the tree line, and Sam broke through the brush a moment later. A long wooden plank balanced against his shoulder, another man close behind him carrying a second one. Sam's eyes found Mia first, the way they always did, before sweeping past her to the mud flat, to the cub, to the tigress standing sentinel over the whole scene. "God," he breathed. "It's true." "Less talking, more planks," Mia said, though there was no real bite in it. She was too focused on the cub, whose small head had tipped further back, whose cries had gone from sharp to something more like whimpers, thin and worn out. Sam didn't argue. He set the plank down at the edge of the flat, testing its weight against the mud the way Mia had shown him a dozen times in training drills that had never felt this real. The other man did the same with his plank, laying it a few feet to the side, angling toward the cub's position. Joseph knelt at the rope coil, his hands moving fast despite their age, working a loop into one end with the kind of practiced ease that came from decades of handling animals in trouble. "We're going to need to get that loop around his middle, under the front legs if we can. Can't pull him by the neck, could hurt him worse." "I'll go out on the plank," Mia said. "I'm lightest." "Mia." Sam's voice was low, careful. "Let me." She looked at him, really looked at him for the first time since he'd arrived, and something old and tired passed between them. A conversation they'd had 100 times about who took the risk, who went first, who mattered more if something went wrong. She didn't have time for it now. "No," she said simply. "I'm already close to her. She trusts me being here. Let's not change that now." Joseph nodded slowly, handing her the looped end of the rope. "Careful going out. Test every step. That mud doesn't care how light you are. It just cares how long you stand still." Mia took the rope, looping the slack around her shoulder, and stepped onto the first plank Sam had laid down. It held, sinking only slightly under her weight, and she let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. She moved to the second plank, testing it the same way, while Priya and the village man worked to slide a third plank further out, closer to the cub's flailing, exhausted body. Ronnie paced now, back and forth along the edge of the flat, her tail lashing, her eyes darting between the cub and Mia and the rope in Mia's hands, as if she understood exactly what was about to happen and could barely stand to wait for it. "I've got it," Mia called back, but the last plank was still a few feet short of the cub, and the gap between them was pure mud, dark and shining and hungry-looking in the gray morning light. She stretched forward with the loop, but her fingers came up short by nearly a foot. "Here," Sam said, already stepping past her onto the plank. "I've got a longer reach. Let me try." "Sam, wait." But he was already moving, careful and low, his boots finding the edge of the last plank Priya had slid into place. He crouched down, testing his balance, one hand braced against the wood, the other reaching out toward the cub with the looped rope. The cub had gone quiet now, its small chest rising and falling in short, ragged breaths, its eyes half closed. Only the faint twitch of its ears showed it was still fighting. "Easy, buddy," Sam murmured, more to himself than the cub. "Easy now." He leaned further, stretching his arm until his shoulder pressed hard against the edge of the plank, the loop swinging just above the cub's soaked, matted fur. Behind him, Rani's pacing stopped. She stood rigid, watching, her whole body coiled tight like a spring. "Almost," Sam breathed. "Almost there." The loop dropped over the cub's head, and Sam worked it down carefully, sliding it past the small shoulders, guiding it under the front legs the way Joseph had said. The cub let out a weak, startled cry, but didn't fight it, too exhausted to do much more than blink up at the man leaning over it. "Got it," Sam shouted, triumph breaking through the strain in his voice. "I've got the loop. Pull him steady, not too fast." Joseph and Priya braced against the rope on solid ground, and Mia felt the tension come alive in her hands, the rope going taut as the cub's weight settled into it. That was when the plank beneath Sam gave a low, groaning crack. "Sam!" Mia's voice tore out of her before she even understood what she was seeing. The wood splintered under his shifting weight, one end sinking suddenly into the mud, and Sam's balance broke apart in an instant. His arms pinwheeled, grasping for anything solid, but there was nothing there but air and mist. He went down hard, his legs punching through the surface of the mudflat, and the ground swallowed him almost eagerly, like it had been waiting. "Sam!" Priya screamed from the bank. "Get back!" Joseph shouted, though there was nowhere for anyone to get back to, no safe distance from what was happening right in front of them. Sam thrashed, trying to pull himself free, but the mud only pulled harder in answer, sucking at his legs, dragging him down past his knees, past his hips, the wet ground closing around him like a fist. His face went white with shock, his breath coming in short, panicked bursts. I can't get out! It's got me! It's got me!" "Don't fight it!" Mia yelled, dropping to her knees on the plank still beneath her, the rope with the cub still gripped tight in one hand. "Sam, listen to me. Don't thrash. You'll sink faster." But it was too late for calm instructions. Sam's whole body had gone rigid with panic, his arms slapping against the surface of the mud, searching for anything to grab onto. Finding nothing but more of the same dark, endless muck, he sank another few inches, the mud now creeping past his waist, cold and thick and relentless. "Somebody help him!" Priya's voice cracked as she scrambled for the second rope coil, her hands shaking so badly she nearly dropped it. Rani let out a sound unlike anything Mia had heard from her before. A deep, rumbling growl that seemed to come from somewhere ancient, somewhere beyond fear or instinct. Her ears flattened against her skull, her muscles bunching beneath her striped coat, every part of her poised on the edge of some decision only she understood. Sam's eyes found Mia's across the short, impossible distance between them, wide and terrified, his breath coming fast and shallow as the mud pulled him another inch deeper. "Mia!" he choked out. "Mia, I'm sinking." "Sam!" Mia screamed his name so loud it tore at her throat, raw and desperate. She threw herself flat on the plank, reaching out with her free hand even though she knew, some cold and logical part of her brain knew, that she was still too far away to reach him. "The rope! Get the other rope!" Joseph bellowed, already moving, his old knees creaking as he half ran, half stumbled toward Priya. Priya's hands shook so hard the coil nearly slipped from her fingers. I've got it! Hold on, Sam! Just hold on!" But Sam was sinking faster now. The mud had crept up past his waist, and every time he moved, every desperate twist of his body trying to find something solid, it only pulled him down further. His arms slapped against the surface, sending up small, dark splashes, and his breath came out in short, panicked gasps that sounded like sobs. "Stop moving!" Mia shouted at him, her voice cracking. "Sam, please, you have to stay still. You're making it worse." "I can't." His voice was thin and scared, nothing like the steady, calm Sam she knew. "Mia, I can't feel the bottom. There's nothing under me. There's nothing there." Joseph reached Priya and grabbed the second coil of rope from her hands, already turning to run back toward the mudflat. But even Mia could see it wouldn't be fast enough. The distance was too far. The mud was too hungry. Sam had sunk to his chest now, his arms still above the surface but barely, his chin tilting up as if the ground itself were trying to swallow him whole. "Joseph, hurry!" Priya's voice broke into something like a sob. That was when Rani moved. It happened so fast that afterward, none of them could quite agree on what they'd seen first, the growl or the motion, the decision or the leap. One moment the tigress was standing rigid at the edge of the mudflat, her whole body coiled with tension, her ears flat against her skull. The next moment she was airborne, a streak of orange and black cutting through the gray morning light, her powerful legs driving her forward across the planks Priya had laid down, planks that groaned and cracked beneath even her light, sure-footed weight. "Rani, no!" Mia's voice came out strangled, some old instinct screaming that a tiger should never be this close, should never be moving this fast toward a man who couldn't defend himself. But there was no time to do anything but watch. The tigress didn't hesitate at the edge of the mud. She didn't test the ground the way the humans had, didn't feel for solid footing first. She simply launched herself the last few feet, her jaws opening wide, and closed her teeth around the thick collar of Sam's jacket. Sam let out a strangled cry, more shock than pain, as the tigress's weight and momentum yanked him backward out of the mud's grip. For one terrible second it looked like the mud might win anyway, might hold onto his legs even as his upper body was dragged free. But then there was a wet, sucking sound, almost like the earth itself giving up, and Sam came loose all at once, sliding backward across the surface of the mudflat with Rani pulling him, her muscles bunching and releasing with each powerful stride. She dragged him clear onto solid ground before letting go, stepping back immediately, her whole body still trembling with the effort and the strangeness of what she had just done. For a moment, nobody moved. Sam lay on his back in the mud and grass at the edge of the flat, gasping, his chest heaving, his clothes soaked through and streaked with dark mud from his boots to his shoulders. Joseph and Priya stood frozen mid-stride, the rope still clutched uselessly in Joseph's hands. Mia knelt on the plank, her mouth open, no sound coming out. Rani turned away from Sam without a second glance, padding back toward the edge of the mudflat where her cub still lay half-sunk, weak and waiting, held only by the loop of rope Mia had never let go of. The tigress settled back onto her haunches beside the mud, pacing again, her golden eyes fixed on her cub, as though nothing at all unusual had just happened. "Sam, can you move?" Joseph was already at his side, hands checking his arms, his legs, looking for anything broken. Sam coughed, spitting out a mouthful of muddy water, and pushed himself up onto his elbows. I'm okay, just give me a second." "You don't have a second!" Mia's voice cut through the air, still shaking but sharpening now, snapping back into the focus that crisis always demanded of her. "The cub is still going down. Sam, I need you." He looked at her, and something passed between them, old and familiar, the way they used to work together before everything broke apart. He nodded and struggled to his feet, wobbling for a moment before Joseph steadied him. "Rope," Mia said. "Priya, give it here." Priya splashed forward, handing over the second coil with hands that still trembled, though her voice was steady. "Tell me what to do." "We loop it under his front legs, above the first one already on him." "Sam, you know the knot. You taught me this knot." "Bowline?" Sam muttered, wiping mud from his eyes. Yeah, I remember." They moved carefully out onto the planks, Ronnie watching every step, her tail flicking low and slow against the ground, a sound coming from deep in her chest that wasn't quite a growl, and wasn't quite anything Mia had ever heard a tiger make before. It was almost like a plea. "Easy," Mia whispered, not sure if she was talking to the tigress or herself. "Easy, we're helping him." The cub had gone quiet now. Too quiet, his small chest rising and falling in shallow little pulls. His eyes were half closed, his strength nearly gone. Mia's stomach twisted at the sight. This was the part that scared her most, the moment where an animal simply stopped fighting. "Don't you give up," she said to him, low and fierce. "Don't you dare." Sam looped the second rope with practiced hands, his fingers steadier now that he had something to do, some purpose to focus on, besides the memory of the mud closing over his own chest. "Got it. Priya, take this end, wrap it twice around your waist like Mia showed you." Priya did, planting her feet in the soft ground, bracing herself the way Joseph had taught her the summer before. "On 3, Mia said. 1, 2, 3. They pulled. The mud fought back, the way it always did, sucking and groaning, unwilling to let go of what it had claimed. Mia's arms burned, her shoulders screaming with the effort, her boots slipping in the wet ground as she threw her whole body weight backward. Beside her, Priya cried out with the strain, and Sam added his weight to the rope even though his legs still shook from his own ordeal. The cub barely moved. An inch, maybe 2. "Again," Mia shouted. "Again, pull!" Ronnie's growl deepened, and for a terrible second Mia thought the tigress might finally turn on them, might decide that this slow, painful process was somehow their fault. Instead, the tigress paced closer. Closer than she had let anyone come the whole morning, until she stood right at the edge of the mud, inches from Mia's shoulder, watching her cub with wide, desperate eyes. "Come on," Mia breathed. "Come on, come on." They pulled one more time, everything they had left in their tired, aching bodies, and this time the mud released him all at once, the same wet, sucking sound that had freed Sam moments before. The cub slid free across the surface of the flat, gasping, his small body trembling all over, mud caked thick across his fur. For a moment, nobody breathed. Then Ronnie was there, nuzzling her cub with her enormous nose, checking him over, her low growl softening into something almost like a purr. The cub let out a weak, shaky cry and pressed himself against his mother's side. Mia sat back on the plank, her arms shaking, mud smeared across her face where she'd wiped away sweat, and watched as Ronnie gently gathered her cub against her body. The tigress looked at Mia one last time. A long, steady look that Mia would never forget, before she turned and carried her cub into the tree line, disappearing into the green shadows as if she had never been there at all. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. They simply knelt there in the mud, filthy and exhausted, tears streaming down Priya's face, Sam's hand finding Mia's shoulder, all of them overwhelmed by something too big for words. It was 3 days later when Joseph's phone rang with the call that shattered the peace. "They've seen the drone footage," he said, his face pale. "The forestry department. They're calling Ronnie a liability. They want her captured." A week after the rescue, dust rose along the gravel road leading into the reserve. Mia heard the vehicles before she saw them. 3 white trucks with the forestry department's green emblem painted on the doors, engines growling as they rolled to a stop outside the ranger station. She stood on the porch steps, wiping her hands on her uniform pants, watching doors open one by one. 4 officials stepped out, dressed sharp and clean in a way that never belonged out here, their boots barely touched by mud. The one in front was a tall man with silver hair and a clipboard tucked under his arm, his face set in the kind of calm that made Mia's stomach drop before he even said a word. "Ranger Alvarez?" he asked. "That's me." "Director Nasser, Regional Forestry Department." He didn't offer his hand. "We need to talk about the tigress." Mia's jaw tightened. "Ronnie." "The animal in the drone footage," he said, as if the name didn't matter. "It's gone viral. 500,000 views by yesterday morning. People are calling her a hero. Do you understand what that means for us?" "It means she saved a man's life," Mia said. "That's what it means." Nasser opened his folder, pulled out a printed still from the footage. Ronnie's jaws clamped gently on Sam's jacket, dragging him from the mud. "It means a wild tiger walked within feet of 4 human beings and didn't attack. It means she's comfortable around people. That's not heroism, Ranger Alvarez. That's habituation. That's a liability. She was protecting her cub. She wasn't looking for a handout." "Today," Nasser said. "What about next week when she's hungry and remembers there are humans nearby who don't run? What about when a farmer's child is playing near the tree line and Ronnie decides to walk into the open instead of staying hidden?" He shook his head slowly. "We can't take that risk. Not after this kind of exposure." Joseph stepped up beside Mia, his voice steady despite the tightness around his eyes. "With respect, Director, I've studied that tigress for 6 years. I tagged her myself. She's never once approached the village. Not before this, not after." "And yet here we are," Nasser said, gesturing at the trucks, the officials, the folder full of photographs. "The order's already been drafted. Tranquilize the mother, relocate both her and the cub to a containment facility for evaluation, possibly permanent housing, depending on her behavior in captivity." The words hit Mia like a slap. "Containment? You mean a cage?" "I mean safety," Nasser said. "For the animal and for the public." Mia felt something rise in her chest, hot and furious, the same feeling that had carried her through the mudflat a week ago. "You didn't see her. You saw 4 seconds of footage from a drone a mile up. You didn't see how she paced at the edge of that mud for an hour, terrified, but she never once came at us. She trusted us to save her cub because she had no other choice. That's not a liability. That's a mother doing whatever it takes to protect her child. Locking her in a cage for that isn't safety. It's punishment for being desperate." Nasser's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind his eyes, the smallest crack in his composure. "I understand this is emotional for you. It's emotional for a lot of people watching that video. But emotion isn't evidence, Ranger Alvarez. I need something I can put in a report, something that holds up." "Then give me the chance to get it," Mia said. "Camera traps, behavioral logs, distance monitoring. Let us prove she hasn't changed, that she's still exactly what she's always been, a wild animal who stays wild except when her cub's life is on the line." Nasser studied her for a long moment, the silence stretching thin and taut between them. Behind him, the other officials shifted, glancing at each other, waiting for his decision. 2 weeks, he said finally. You bring me documented proof this tigress poses no ongoing risk to human life, verified by credible sources, and I'll consider revising the order. But if there's so much as one more incident, one villager who reports her near their home, one sign she's lost her fear of people, the transfer happens immediately. No appeals. Do you understand? Mia held his gaze, her heart pounding. I understand. The trucks were gone by the time the sun dropped behind the tree line, but the dust they'd kicked up still hung in the air, turning the evening light a dull orange. Mia stood in the ranger station's small meeting room, pinning a map of the reserve to the corkboard with hands that hadn't stopped shaking since Nasser's trucks pulled away. Joseph came in first, easing the screen door shut behind him instead of letting it slap. He carried a thermos of coffee and 2 mugs, setting them on the table without a word. Priya arrived a few minutes later, still in the bright yellow scarf she wore to teach. Her bicycle leaned against the porch rail outside. You look like you haven't slept, Priya said, dropping into a chair. I haven't, Mia admitted. Not since they left. Joseph poured coffee into the mugs, sliding one toward Mia. Tell us everything he said, word for word, if you can manage it. So she did. She told them about the folder full of photographs, about the phrase habituation, about the 2 weeks Nasser had given them, and the cage waiting at the end of that clock if they failed. Priya's mouth tightened as she listened. Joseph's face stayed still, but his knuckles went pale around his mug. 2 weeks, Priya repeated when Mia finished. That's nothing. That's barely enough time to organize a bake sale, let alone save a tiger's life. It's what we've got, Mia said. So we use it. Joseph leaned back in his chair, the wood creaking under him. He wants proof she's not a danger. That means documentation. Behavior logs, distance readings, feeding patterns, movement tracking. Everything has to be dated, time-stamped, verified by someone with credentials the department can't dismiss. That's you, Mia said. That's me, Joseph agreed. I can set up the camera traps again, the ones we used when I first tagged her. I still have most of the equipment in storage. It's old, but it works. Priya was already pulling a notebook from her bag, flipping to a blank page. And I can get people talking, not just villagers, the school children too. They saw that footage same as everyone else. If we can show the department that people here aren't afraid of Ronnie, that they understand what she did, that carries weight, officials care about public opinion, we give them a wave of it they can't ignore. Mia felt something loosen in her chest, just slightly, hearing them fall into place beside her the way they always had. We need every camera we can find, every angle. If she so much as looks toward the village, we need to know before Nasser does. I'll start tomorrow at first light, Joseph said. The screen door creaked again. Sam stood in the frame, one hand braced against it, still in his work boots, mud dried up to his shins from a day spent repairing the eastern fence line. He must have heard the trucks come and go from wherever he'd been working, because he didn't ask what happened. He already knew. I want to help, he said simply. Mia's spine went straight. For a moment the room felt smaller, the air thinner. She hadn't spoken more than a few clipped sentences to Sam since the mud flat, since the awful second he'd gone under and Ronnie had hauled him back out by the jacket. She could still feel the ghost of that fear in her chest sometimes, sharp and sudden, whenever she looked at him. You don't have to, she said. You've done enough already. I want to, he repeated, quieter this time. She saved my life, Mia. I owe her something for that. And I'm good with the rope rigs, the camera mounts, all of it. You know I am." She did know. That was the trouble. Priya glanced between them, tactfully saying nothing, her pen hovering over her notebook. Mia looked at Sam a moment longer, weighing the old ache against the ticking clock Nasser had handed her. 2 weeks. Barely enough time to save a family that had already saved one of theirs. She didn't have room left over for pride, or fear, or whatever tangled thing sat between her and Sam these days. "Fine," she said finally, the word coming out rougher than she meant it to. "We start at dawn, all of us?" Sam nodded, stepping fully into the room, and Joseph slid a mug of coffee across the table toward him without being asked. The morning came in gray and cool, mist still clinging low to the marsh grass, when Mia met the others at the equipment shed. Joseph was already there, kneeling over a plastic bin full of camera housings, checking each one with the careful patience of a man who had done this 1,000 times before, and still refused to rush it. "These are older models," he said, holding one up for Mia to see. "Infrared trigger, battery pack good for about 10 days if we're careful. Not fancy, but they don't lie." "They don't need to be fancy," Mia said. "They just need to catch her being herself." Priya arrived with a satchel of stakes and zip ties, her bicycle left leaning against the shed same as always. Sam came last, carrying the coil of rope and a ladder over one shoulder, his boots still crusted with yesterday's mud. Nobody mentioned the awkward quiet that had followed him into the meeting room the night before. There wasn't time for it now. They split into 2 teams. Joseph took Priya along the northern tree line, where Ronnie had been spotted most often according to the old tagging data, while Mia and Sam worked the southern edge closer to the mud flat where it had all started. They moved slowly, careful not to crowd the territory, keeping a distance Joseph had insisted on, at least 200 yards from any spot they suspected the den might be. "Higher," Mia said, watching Sam strap a camera housing to a tree trunk. "Angle it down toward the game trail, not straight across. She's low to the ground when she moves. We want to catch her whole body, not just her head." Sam adjusted the mount without argument, checking the small red light on the side, blinked steady. "You've done this before." "With Joseph, years ago. Before—" She stopped herself, tightening a zip tie harder than it needed. Sam didn't push. He never had, not really. Not in all the ways that would have made this easier to bear. He just handed her the next camera and let the silence settle into something almost comfortable. By mid-afternoon, they had 8 traps staked out in a loose ring, each one hidden in brush or lashed high in a tree, motion sensors aimed at the clearings and trails Ronnie was known to favor. Joseph checked the batteries one final time before they packed up, and Priya noted every location in her notebook with careful hand-drawn maps, the kind she might use later to explain things to a classroom full of children or a room full of skeptical officials. 2 weeks, Priya said as they walked back toward the station, the sun beginning its slow drop toward the tree line. That's how long we've got to make her tell her own story. Mia didn't answer. She was thinking about Ronnie's eyes that first morning, the way the tigress had looked at her instead of charging, asking without words for something no wild animal should have known how to ask for. She hoped the cameras had caught even a fraction of that same quiet intelligence. That night, the 4 of them gathered around Joseph's old laptop in the ranger station, the screen casting pale light across the table as he plugged in the memory card from the first camera. Nobody spoke while the files loaded. The first clip showed nothing but swaying grass. The second, a deer passing through at dusk. But the third made Priya gasp softly, her hand rising to her mouth. Ronnie moved into frame low and silent, muscles rolling beneath her striped coat as she stalked something unseen in the brush. She froze, ears twitching, then sprang, the whole clip ending in a blur of motion and a puff of disturbed grass. The next clip, from another camera nearer the den, showed her lying on her side in a patch of sunlight. Kavi pressed against her belly, nursing while she groomed the top of his head with slow, patient licks. Later still, a clip of the cub tumbling over her front paws, swatting at her tail while she let him, patient and unbothered, every motion of hers gentle despite her size. "Look at that," Joseph murmured, leaning closer to the screen. "That's a healthy, wild tigress raising her cub exactly the way nature intended. No fences, no handouts, no village in sight." Mia felt her throat tighten watching it, something warm and aching all at once. It was proof, real proof, the kind Nasser had asked for. But she also knew, even as relief loosened something in her chest, that one night of footage would never be enough. The path back from the northern cameras cut through a stretch of tall grass, still wet from the morning mist, and Mia walked it the way she walked most things now, fast, eyes forward, like slowing down might let something catch up to her. Sam kept pace beside her, the coil of rope looped over one shoulder, saying nothing for a long while. The sun had dropped low enough to turn the marsh gold, long shadows stretching out from the reeds. Somewhere off to the west, a heron called once and went quiet. "You've barely stopped moving in 3 days," Sam said finally. His voice was easy, not pushing, the way he always talked to her now, careful, like she was a fence line he didn't want to lean on too hard. "Joseph had to tell you twice to eat lunch yesterday. There's a lot to do." Mia kept her eyes on the trail. 2 weeks isn't much time. It's not nothing either. Sam adjusted the rope on his shoulder. "Priya's got the whole village writing letters. Joseph's calling in favors he's been saving for 20 years. You don't have to carry this like it's yours alone." Mia didn't answer right away. A dragonfly cut across the path in front of them, quick and glinting, and she watched it go like it might have somewhere better to be than this conversation. "I know I don't have to," she said. "But you are." Sam slowed his steps, just enough that she had to either match him or pull ahead, and something in her didn't want to pull ahead. "Mia, I've known you a long time. I know what your determined face looks like. This isn't that. This is something else." She kept walking. The grass whispered against her boots. "She looked at me," Mia said after a moment. "That first morning, before any of you got there. She backed away from her own cub, from the one thing in the world she'd fight anything for, and she looked right at me like she was asking. Like she knew I could do something and she needed me to." "I believe you." Sam's voice was quiet. "I saw the footage, too. I know what kind of animal she is. It's not just that." Mia's jaw tightened. "It's that nobody ever taught her to trust a person. She just did it. She looked past every instinct that should have made her run, or fight, or hide, and she trusted a stranger with the only thing that mattered to her." Her voice cracked slightly on the last word, and she pressed her lips together like she could push it back down. Sam stopped walking. "Mia." She kept moving 2 more steps before she stopped too, not turning around, her back to him, shoulders rigid. "Why does this one matter so much?" he asked, gentle, no accusation in it at all. "Out of everything you've done out here, every rescue, every rehab, why is this the one that's got you not sleeping?" For a long moment there was only the sound of the wind moving through the reeds, and somewhere far off, the low call of the heron again. "Because I sent him," Mia said. Sam went still. "Danny." Her voice came out thin, like something worn down to its last thread. 2 years ago, there was a storm coming in, bad one, and the river gauge needed checking before it flooded the lower trail. I was busy with something else. I don't even remember what anymore, some stupid paperwork, and I told him to go. I told my little brother to go check the gauge in a storm because it was easier than doing it myself. She turned around then, and her eyes were bright, glassy, the careful control she wore like armor cracking straight down the middle. The flash flood took him before anyone even knew he was in trouble. I found out over the radio. I was standing right here, Sam, almost this exact spot, when they told me they'd found him. Her hands were shaking now, and she pressed them together like that might stop it. I sent him, and he died. And I have never once forgiven myself for it. The morning after Mia told Sam about Danny, she woke up feeling wrung out, like a towel someone had twisted too hard. She didn't talk about it again, and Sam didn't push, but something between them had shifted, softened at the edges. She noticed it when she poured coffee, and he was already there with a second mug, waiting. She was still nursing that same coffee, sitting at the battered desk in the ranger station going over Joseph's notes on Ronnie's tagging history, when she heard the chatter outside. It got louder fast, a wave of high voices all talking over each other, and then the screen door banged open, and Priya stepped through with a parade of children behind her, maybe 15 of them, all elbows and backpacks and wide eyes. "Mia," Priya called, a little breathless, her dark braid coming loose from its tie. "I hope this is all right." They wouldn't stop asking questions, so I figured, why not bring the questions straight to the source? Mia stood, setting down her coffee, and the children surged forward like the desk was a shoreline, and she was something washed up on it. "Is it true she carried a whole grown man?" a boy near the front asked, his voice cracking with excitement. He couldn't have been more than 9, with a gap where his front teeth should be. "My cousin said she picked him up like a toy." "She grabbed his jacket," Mia said, crouching down so she was closer to their height. "Pulled him out of the mud before it could pull him under. It was very fast. Very brave." A girl near the back, small and serious-looking, raised her hand like she was in a classroom. "Is the baby tiger okay? Is he scared?" "He's doing well," Mia said. "He's young, and young things scare easy, but he's got a good mother. She's not going to let anything happen to him if she can help it." The room filled with a dozen more questions at once, tumbling over each other, and Mia found herself laughing, actually laughing, for the first time in longer than she could remember. Priya caught her eye over the children's heads and smiled. The kind of smile that said she'd noticed. When the noise settled some, Priya stepped forward and rested a hand on the nearest boy's shoulder. "The children have been asking me something too," she said. "They want to know if there's a way they can help, not just hear about it. Help." Mia looked out at the sea of faces looking back at her, hopeful, waiting. She thought about the forestry officials, about drone footage and liability reports, and the cold, careful language of bureaucracy that didn't leave room for a tigress looking a stranger dead in the eye and asking for help the only way she knew how. She thought about how that kind of language rarely lost to anything except a bigger, louder kind of caring. "You know," Mia said slowly, an idea taking shape even as she spoke it. "The people deciding what happens to her, they're going to read reports, numbers, data, but that's not going to be enough to change their minds, not on its own." She looked at Priya. "What might change their minds is knowing how many people care. Real people, real stories." Priya's eyes lit up. "Letters," she said. "Pictures. We could show them why she matters, not just tell them." "That cub needs a name too," Mia said, glancing at the little girl who'd asked if he was scared. "Something better than just the cub." The children erupted into suggestions immediately, a dozen names flying around the room, until the boy with the gap tooth shouted over everyone, "Kavi, like the reserve, Kavi!" It caught like a spark in dry grass. Kavi. The name passed from child to child, and by the time Priya herded them toward the long table in the corner of the station where she spread out paper and crayons and pencils, they were already chanting it, delighted with themselves. Mia watched them settle in, heads bent over their pages, small hands working in careful, earnest strokes. A tiger with orange fur too bright to be real. A cub curled against its mother's side. Words in careful, uneven handwriting. "Please don't take Kavi away. His mommy saved a man. She's a hero." Priya sat beside Mia, watching the same scene. "This is going to be bigger than you think," she said quietly. Mia didn't answer, but for the first time in a long time, she let herself hope that might be true. The next few days blurred together into a steady rhythm of work. Mia had almost forgotten what it felt like to have a real purpose, something bigger than getting through one more lonely shift. Now every morning started the same way. Coffee in hand, boots laced tight, heading out before the sun cleared the tree line to check the cameras. Joseph had set up 6 of them along the edges of Ronnie's territory, careful to keep a respectful distance from her den. "We don't want to spook her," he'd said, tapping the side of one camera housing like it was a delicate instrument. "We want her to just live her life. That's the whole point." And live her life she did. Night after night, the cameras caught her padding through the tall grass, patient and unhurried, teaching Kavi to stalk a beetle, to freeze at the sound of a snapping branch, to sniff cautiously at the edge of a stream before drinking. There was nothing wild or reckless in her movements, nothing that looked like a tiger circling closer to danger. Just a mother, doing what mothers do. "Look at this," Joseph said one evening, hunched over his laptop at the ranger station, scrolling through hours of footage. He turned the screen toward Mia and Sam. "3 nights running, she skirts the village boundary here." He tapped the corner of the screen. "But watch what she does." They watched. Ronnie paused at the tree line, ears swiveling, body low and alert. Then she turned, unhurried, and led Kavi back the way they'd come, deeper into the reserve, away from the scattered lights of the village. "She's not looking for handouts," Sam said quietly. "She's avoiding people, on purpose." "Exactly," Joseph said. "That's not habituation. That's exactly the opposite. She wants nothing to do with them unless her cub's life is on the line." Mia felt something settle in her chest, solid and sure. It wasn't just a hope anymore. It was proof. Joseph spent his mornings drafting reports, his handwriting careful and precise, citing every observation, every time stamp, every measured distance between Ronnie's territory and the nearest home. He included his own notes from years of monitoring her, going all the way back to the day he'd first tagged her as a young tigress, barely out of her own mother's care. "She's been a model resident of this reserve for years," he told Mia, sliding a folder across the desk. "This isn't some rogue animal. This is a good mother trying to survive." Sam, meanwhile, threw himself into gathering testimonies. He drove the dirt roads between villages, notebook in hand, talking to farmers and herders who'd lived alongside Ronnie's territory for years without incident. An old man named Rafik, who kept goats near the eastern boundary, laughed when Sam asked if he was afraid of the tigress. "Afraid? She's been here longer than my goats have. She keeps to herself. Better neighbor than some people I know." Sam wrote it all down, word for word, and by the end of the week, he had a stack of testimonies thick enough to make a case of its own. Farmers, teachers, fishermen, person after person saying the same thing in different words. "She's never bothered us." Meanwhile, Priya's classroom had become something like a small newsroom. The children's letters and drawings had been photographed and posted online by a local journalist who'd heard about the rescue, and the story had caught fire in a way none of them expected. Videos of the original rescue circulated alongside photos of crayon tigers and shaky handwritten pleas. "Please don't take Kavi away." News vans began showing up outside the reserve gates, reporters asking for interviews, radio stations picking up the story and running it across the region. "It's not just us anymore," Priya said one afternoon, breathless with excitement as she showed Mia the latest article, a photo of Ronnie mid-stride splashed across the top. "People are sharing it everywhere. There's a petition. Over 10,000 signatures already." Mia stared at the number, hardly able to believe it. 10,000 strangers, all asking the same question the children had asked in her ranger station. All hoping for the same thing. It took another week of mounting pressure, but the call finally came. A representative from the forestry department, his voice clipped and formal but with an edge of reluctance underneath, informed Mia that given the volume of public interest and the quality of the submitted evidence, the department had agreed to reconsider its earlier decision. A formal hearing was scheduled for the following month to determine once and for all what would become of Ronnie and her cub. The district forestry office smelled like old paper and cold coffee. Mia sat at the front of a long table, her folder of evidence stacked neatly in front of her, and tried to keep her hands from shaking. The room was full. 3 officials sat behind a raised desk, faces unreadable. Behind Mia, rows of chairs held Joseph, Sam, Priya, and a dozen villagers who had driven 2 hours just to be there. Rafiq sat near the back, his weathered hat in his lap. Some of Priya's students had come too, clutching crayon drawings of Kavi like they were shields. The lead official, a thin man named Director Rao, cleared his throat. "Ranger Alvarez, you may begin." Mia stood. Her legs felt strange, like they belonged to someone else. She thought of Danny for a moment, the way he used to tell her that being scared and doing the right thing weren't opposites. Then she pressed play on the laptop connected to the projector. The rescue footage filled the screen. Ronnie pacing at the edge of the mud flat. The cub sinking, terrified. Sam pulled into the mud himself, and then Ronnie lunging forward, not to attack, but to save him. Gasps rippled through the room, even though most of them had already seen it online a dozen times. Seeing it big, on a wall, seemed to hit different. "This is the moment that started everything," Mia said, her voice steady even though her heart pounded. "A wild tigress chose to save a human life instead of taking one. That is not the behavior of a dangerous animal. That is the behavior of a mother who understands trust." She clicked to the next slide. Weeks of camera trap footage played in quick succession. Ronnie teaching Kavi to hunt. Ronnie drinking from the stream. Ronnie turning away from the village lights, night after night, leading her cub back into the safety of the trees. In 3 weeks of continuous monitoring, Mia said, Ronnie approached the village boundary 4 times. Every single time she turned back on her own. No aggression, no scavenging, no incidents. She looked up from her notes, meeting Director Rao's eyes. "She is not seeking out people. She only came to us once, when her cub's life was in danger, just like any mother would." Joseph stood next, laying out his decades of records, his voice calm and full of quiet authority. He spoke of the day he first tagged Ronnie as a young tigress, of years of observation showing a consistent, healthy pattern of avoidance and respect toward human settlements. Sam followed, reading testimonies from farmers and herders who had lived beside her territory for years without a single problem. Then Priya stood, and instead of reading a testimony, she simply held up a stack of letters. "These are from children," she said. "They don't know about liability or policy. They just know a mother saved someone's life, and they don't understand why we would punish her for it." One of her students, a small girl named Anjali, stood up without being asked. "Please don't take Kavi away," she said, her voice trembling but clear. "He's just a baby." The room went quiet. Even Director Rao, pen frozen over his notepad, seemed to sit a little straighter. The officials leaned together, whispering, flipping through the folder of evidence Mia had given them. Minutes passed. It felt like hours. Mia stood at the front of the room, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles ached, waiting. Finally, Director Rao looked up. "The department is not in the business of ignoring evidence," he said slowly, "nor public sentiment when it is this significant." He glanced at his colleagues, who nodded. "We propose a compromise. The tigress and her cub will remain in the wild, under a formal probationary period of 6 months. Continuous monitoring will be required." He turned to Mia. "Ranger Alvarez, given your documented work, you will serve as lead observer for this program. Any sign of dangerous behavior, and the department reserves the right to revisit this decision." For a moment, Mia couldn't speak. Relief crashed over her so hard her knees nearly buckled. Behind her, the room erupted. Priya threw her arms around one of the children. Sam let out a whoop, pulling Joseph into a rough hug. Rafiq slapped his hat against his knee, grinning ear to ear. Someone was already on the phone, calling the village, and within minutes the news had spread like wildfire, carried from the forestry office all the way back to Cavalli, where by the time Mia and the others made the drive home, the whole town was already gathered outside the reserve gates, cheering, laughing, hugging strangers, celebrating a tigress and her cub who would get to stay wild. The celebration spilled out under strings of lights that someone had hung between the reserve's fence posts, probably in about 10 minutes flat, given how crooked they hung. Someone had brought a drum. Someone else had brought enough food to feed 3 villages. Children ran between the tables, and Priya's students proudly showed off their crayon drawings of Kavi to anyone who would look, which was everyone. Mia stood a little apart from it all, near the edge of the tree line, where the noise softened into something like music instead of chaos. From here, she had a clear view down the slope toward the quiet stretch of grass where Ronnie liked to rest in the evenings. And there, in the fading gold light, was Kavi. The cub tumbled over his own paws, chasing a moth that dipped and weaved just out of reach. He pounced, missed, rolled, and popped back up like nothing had happened, tail flicking with pure delight. Ronnie lay a few feet away, watching him with the calm patience of a mother who had already decided the world was, for tonight at least, a safe place. Mia felt something crack open in her chest. Not painfully. Gently, like a window being pried loose after years of being stuck shut. She hadn't let herself feel this in a long time. Not joy without guilt attached to it. Not happiness that didn't immediately drag Danny's memory behind it like a stone. She watched Kavi tumble again, watched Ronnie's tail twitch with quiet amusement, and for the first time in 2 years, Mia let the feeling simply exist without trying to shrink it down into something smaller and safer. "You're smiling," a voice said behind her. She didn't have to turn to know it was Sam. She'd have known his voice anywhere, low and easy, like it belonged in the quiet. "Guess I am," she said. He came to stand beside her, close but not too close, his eyes following hers down toward the cub. For a while, neither of them said anything. The party noise drifted behind them, distant and warm. "He's going to be all right," Sam said. "Both of them." Yeah, Mia said. I think they are. Sam glanced at her sideways. You did that, you know. Fought for them when nobody else would have. Mia shook her head. We did that. Silence settled between them again, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It felt for once like something that might hold weight without breaking. Mia, Sam said finally, quieter now. Can I ask you something? She braced herself, the old instinct to change the subject rising in her throat. But she made herself stay still. Okay. Why did you really push me away, after Danny? He wasn't accusing her. His voice was careful, like he'd been holding the question for 2 years and was finally setting it down. I know you blamed yourself, but I never understood why that meant you had to blame me too, or push me out. Mia's eyes stayed on Kavi, who had given up on the moth and flopped down beside his mother, chest rising and falling in exhausted contentment. Because loving you meant I had something else to lose, she said. Her voice cracked slightly, but she kept going. After Danny, I didn't trust myself to keep anyone safe, not even you, especially not you. She swallowed hard. It felt safer to lose you on my own terms than to risk losing you the way I lost him. Sam was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was gentle. You didn't lose him because you loved him too much, Mia. You lost him because a storm came, and none of us could stop that. Loving people doesn't make you dangerous. It's the only thing that made any of this. He gestured toward the cub, the fence, the whole quiet stretch of reserve. Worth fighting for. Mia felt tears rise, but they didn't feel like grief this time. They felt like relief. I don't know how to just jump back into this, she admitted. Trusting again. It scares me. Then we won't jump, Sam said. We'll just take it slow, one day at a time. No promises bigger than we can keep yet. Mia looked at him. Really looked at him. For the first time in longer than she could remember. I'd like that, she said. Slow. Sam smiled, small and hopeful. Slow, he agreed. Down the hill, Kavi yawned and curled against his mother's side, and the party lights swayed gently behind them in the evening breeze. The clouds started building on a Tuesday, thick and gray, stacking up over the eastern ridge like something the sky was trying to hold back. By Wednesday, they hadn't moved. They'd only grown darker. Joseph stood at the edge of the ranger station with a cup of tea going cold in his hands, watching the horizon with the kind of stillness that made Mia nervous. He'd been at the reserve longer than anyone. When Joseph got quiet like that, it usually meant something. You've got that look, Mia said, coming up beside him. What look? The one where you're about to tell me something I don't want to hear. Joseph almost smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. He set his tea down on the railing, untouched. I've seen a lot of storm seasons come through this reserve, Mia. 30-some years of them. He nodded towards the clouds, which had thickened even in the few minutes they'd been standing there. This one feels different. Different how? The pressure's dropping too fast. The rivers are already swollen from last week's rain, and they haven't had time to recede. If we get the kind of downpour those clouds are promising, the lower trails are going to flood. Maybe worse than that. He rubbed a hand over his jaw, and for the first time since Mia had known him, he looked truly worried. I've radioed the district office. They're saying this could be the worst monsoon system in almost a decade. Mia felt something tighten in her stomach. She glanced down the slope toward the tree line, where Ronnie's monitored zone sat quiet and green, unaware of what was gathering above it. What about Ronnie and Kavi? She asked. Should we move them? Get them to higher ground? We can't move a tiger, Mia, not safely, and not without undoing everything we fought to prove. Joseph shook his head. All we can do is watch, keep the collar signal monitored close. If she starts heading somewhere she shouldn't, we'll know before anyone else does. Priya joined them a few minutes later, her arms full of rolled-up tarps she'd been distributing to the village families along the lower road. Her face was flushed from hurrying up the hill. "They're saying to expect flooding by tonight," she said, breathless. "I've told everyone in the lower village to move their animals and stack sandbags before dark." "Good," Joseph said. "Do the same here. Anything that can wash away, secure it now." The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of preparation. Sam and a few other volunteers hauled equipment up from the riverside supply shed, moving it to higher shelves in the main building. Mia checked and rechecked the tracking equipment, making sure Ronnie's collar signal was strong and steady on the monitor. The tigress and her cub were resting near the eastern slope, well within their usual range. Kavi looked bigger than he had weeks ago, sturdier on his feet, but still small enough that a flood could sweep him away without effort. By early evening, the sky had gone the color of a bruise, purple-gray and swollen-looking. The wind picked up, rattling the loose tin roofing on the equipment shed. Mia stood at the window of the ranger station, watching the first fat drops of rain begin to fall, slow at first, then faster, then in sheets. "Here it comes," Sam said quietly, coming to stand beside her. The storm hit hard just after dark. Rain hammered the roof in a roar that swallowed every other sound. Lightning lit the clouds from the inside, followed seconds later by thunder that rattled the windows. Mia watched the radar screen Joseph had rigged up, the green blotches of rain crawling steadily across the reserve's boundaries, thickening by the hour. By 10 o'clock, the lower trails were already reporting flooding. By midnight, the main river had risen past its markers. Mia didn't sleep. None of them did. They took turns monitoring the radio and the tracking screen through the night, the rain never letting up, the wind screaming through the trees outside like something alive. It was just before dawn when the radio crackled to life, Priya's voice tight and scared on the other end. "Mia? Mia, are you there?" Mia grabbed the receiver, her heart already sinking. "I'm here. What's wrong?" "It's Ronnie." Priya's voice cracked. "Her collar signal, it's gone. She's not in her zone. Mia, she's not anywhere near her zone." Behind her, Joseph's face went pale as he stared at the blank space on the monitor where a steady blinking dot should have been. "She's gone," Priya said. "And people are saying she might be headed toward the village." Mia was already pulling on her rain jacket before Priya's voice finished crackling through the radio. "Say that again," Joseph said, leaning into the receiver, his voice sharper than Mia had heard in months. "Her collar signal just dropped off the map," Priya said. "1 second she was on the eastern slope, then nothing. Some of the village men are saying they heard something big moving through the brush near the lower fields a while ago. They're scared, Joseph. They're talking about going out there themselves." "Tell them not to." Joseph's knuckles were white around the receiver. "Tell them to stay inside. The last thing we need right now is a bunch of frightened men with torches and machetes running into a tiger in the dark." Sam was already at the equipment rack, pulling down rain gear and rope. "I'll take the East Ridge," he said. "If she's moving away from her collar's last position, she'd have to cross the ravine trail to get anywhere near the village." "I'm coming with you," Mia said. Joseph caught her arm. "Mia. Don't." She pulled free, not unkindly, but firm. "I know what you're going to say. I know what this looks like, but I'm not losing her because I was too scared to go out in the rain." Joseph studied her for a long moment, rain already soaking through the window behind him, lightning flickering white across his face. Whatever he saw in her eyes, he didn't argue further. "Take the radio. Check in every 15 minutes. If you don't check in, I'm sending everyone after you, Storm or no storm. Outside, the rain hit like something with weight to it, driving sideways in the wind. The reserve's floodlights barely cut through the downpour, turning the world into smeared gray shapes and rushing water. Mia's boots sank into mud with every step as she and Sam made their way down toward the ravine trail, flashlights carving weak tunnels of light through the storm. "Ronnie!" Mia called, though she knew it was useless, her voice swallowed by thunder before it even left her mouth. They found tracks near the ravine, half filled with rainwater already, but tracks all the same. Big, deep, unmistakably a tiger's. Sam crouched beside them, running his fingers along the edge of one print before the rain erased it entirely. "Fresh," he said. "Maybe an hour old. She's moving fast. Toward the village or away from it?" Sam looked up at her, water dripping off the brim of his hood. "I can't tell. The rain's washing everything out too quick." They pushed on, following the ragged trail of prints as long as they could make them out, the ravine below them roaring louder with every step, swollen with runoff from higher ground. Mia's radio crackled every few minutes with Priya's voice, checking in, relaying updates from the village, each one worse than the last. "They're saying she was spotted near the old grain shed. Somebody says they saw eyes in the trees by the schoolhouse. People are panicking, Mia. They want the forestry department called in now, tonight." Mia gritted her teeth and kept moving, the beam of her flashlight swinging wildly across rain-soaked brush, praying for a glimpse of orange and black, of anything that would tell her Ronnie hadn't done the one thing that would undo everything they'd fought for. It was nearly an hour later, soaked to the bone and shivering, that the radio crackled again, this time with Joseph's voice, low and grim in a way that made Mia's stomach drop before he even said the words. "Mia, I just got off the line with the district office. Joseph, what happened?" There was a pause, filled only with static and the drumming rain. "They're authorizing immediate capture. Word got to them about the missing caller signal, about the village sightings. They're sending a team out at first light to tranquilize and relocate her. Permanently, this time. No more probation." Mia stopped walking, rain running down her face, mixing with something hot behind her eyes that wasn't rain at all. "How long do we have?" "A few hours," Joseph said. "Maybe less." "A few hours, maybe less." Mia stared at the radio in her hand like it had burned her. "Did you hear me?" Joseph asked. "Mia, come back to the station. We need to regroup, figure out our next move as a team." "There's no time for that." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "If they're coming at first light, I need to find her before then. I need proof she's not near the village, that she never was." "Mia." Sam's hand found her shoulder, gentle but urgent. "We can look together. Come on, let's head back, get warm, make a plan with Joseph. This storm isn't letting up." She shrugged him off, more roughly than she meant to. The ravine trail splits up ahead. One way goes toward the village. The other follows the river down past the old crossing. She was already turning, already moving. "I'll take the river. You take the village side." "Mia, listen to yourself." Sam's flashlight beam shook slightly as he stepped in front of her, blocking her path. "You want to go alone? Along the river? In a flood? Do you hear what you're saying?" "I hear it fine." "Then you know how this looks." His voice cracked, just slightly, the rain running down his face like tears he wasn't shedding. "You know what happened last time you went out alone near rising water." The words landed like a slap, even though she knew he didn't mean them to hurt. Danny's face flashed behind her eyes, the last morning she saw him, the clipboard in his hand, the joke he made about the weather before he walked out the door and never came back. That's exactly why I have to go, she said, quieter now. Because I know that river. I know how it moves, where it floods first, where the banks give way. If Ronnie's confused, if she's running from something, that's where she'd end up, not the village. Or she could be right, and it's exactly where you shouldn't be tonight, of all nights. Sam. She looked at him, rain streaming between them like a curtain neither one could see past. I am not asking your permission. He held her gaze a long moment, jaw tight, something desperate and afraid flickering behind his eyes. Then, slowly, he stepped aside. 15 minutes, he said. You check in every 15 minutes, or I swear I will come after you myself, storm or no storm. 15 minutes, she agreed. And then she was moving, flashlight beams swinging wildly through sheets of rain, boots slipping on mud that used to be solid trail. The river roared louder with every step she took toward it, a sound like something alive and furious, swollen far past its banks. Trees she remembered standing well back from the water now had their roots half submerged, black shapes swaying in the flashlight's beam. The rain hadn't let up at all. If anything, it was coming down harder, needling against her jacket, running in rivers down the collar of her neck. "Ronnie!" she shouted, though she doubted her voice carried more than a few feet before the storm swallowed it whole. "Ronnie, come on. Where are you?" She pushed along the embankment, flashlight sweeping the churning brown water, looking for eyes, for movement, for anything. The ground here used to be firm, packed dirt worn smooth by years of ranger boots. Now it was soup, the river eating away at it inch by inch, the current tearing great muddy chunks free and swallowing them whole. "Ronnie!" Her boot sank ankle deep, and she yanked it free, pressing forward. "Please, if you can hear me, please just show yourself." The embankment groaned beneath her, a low, wet sound like something giving way deep in the earth. She felt it a half-second before it happened, the ground shifting, crumbling, sliding out from under her boots like it had never been solid at all. Mia's flashlight went flying as she pitched sideways into the churning brown water, the cold slamming into her chest like a fist, the current seizing her instantly and dragging her under. The current slammed her against something hard, a rock or a root, she couldn't tell which, and Mia's whole body screamed with the impact. Her lungs burned, water filled her nose, her mouth, and she thrashed blindly until her head broke the surface, and she gasped in a ragged breath of rain and air. She grabbed for anything solid. Her fingers found a tangle of roots jutting from a small strip of raised ground, half swallowed by the flood, and she hauled herself toward it with strength she didn't know she had left. Her knees hit sand. She dragged herself up onto the sandbar, coughing, choking, water pouring off her in sheets. For a moment she just lay there, chest heaving, rain hammering down on her back like 1,000 tiny fists. Then she felt it. The ground beneath her, already thin and unsteady, trembled with the force of the current tearing at its edges. Mia pushed herself up onto her hands and knees. The sandbar was small, no bigger than the inside of her cabin, and the river had risen so high that it was already lapping at 3 sides of it. She could see, even through the driving rain, that the water was still climbing. Inch by inch, it was eating the little island alive. "Okay," she said out loud, her voice shaking. "Okay, think." She reached for her belt, for the radio clipped there, and her hand closed on nothing but wet fabric. Her stomach dropped. The radio was gone, torn away somewhere in the current, lost in the churn along with her flashlight. No one knew where she was. Sam expected a check in every 15 minutes. He would radio her. He would get silence. And then what? He'd start searching, but the river was long, and the storm was thick. And this sandbar was nothing but a smudge of dark ground in the middle of a raging brown flood. He could walk right past her on the bank and never see her at all. Panic clawed up her throat, hot and sharp. She fought it down, the way she'd trained herself to do 100 times before, in 100 smaller crises. Breathe, think, move. She looked around her tiny island for anything, a fallen branch, a bit of higher ground, anything that might buy her time. There was nothing, just sand and mud, and a few stubborn reeds bending flat in the wind. The water was at her ankles now. She hadn't even noticed it creeping up. "Sam," she whispered, though she knew he couldn't hear her over the storm. "Sam, I'm sorry." She thought of Danny then, the way she'd tried so hard not to for 2 years, the clipboard in his hand, the joke about the weather, the last time she saw his face before the water took him and never gave him back. She had sent him out that day. She had told herself for 2 years that she would never make that mistake again. Never let anyone she loved near rising water because of her. And now here she was, alone, in the exact kind of water that had taken him, about to disappear the same way. "No," she said, louder this time, forcing herself to her feet on legs that shook with cold and exhaustion. "No, I am not doing this again." She scanned the darkness, searching the far bank for any sign of light, any hint of Sam's flashlight cutting through the rain. There was nothing but black trees swaying against a blacker sky, the river roaring between her and solid ground like a wall she couldn't climb. Then, through the sheets of rain, something moved. At first she thought it was a trick of the water, a shadow thrown by a bending branch. But it moved again, low and deliberate, pacing along the opposite bank, and Mia's breath caught in her throat. 2 amber eyes glowed faintly in the darkness, steady and unblinking, fixed directly on her. Mia's heart slammed against her ribs. She knew those eyes. She had seen them once before, across a stretch of QuickSand at dawn, asking her for something she hadn't understood until it was almost too late. Ronnie had found her first. Ronnie did not run. She paced the far bank in tight, furious lines, mud splashing up around her paws with every turn. Behind her, pressed close against her flank, Kavi stumbled to keep up, his small body soaked through, his eyes wide with a fear he was too young to understand. The cub let out a thin, frightened mewl, and Ronnie paused just long enough to nose him back into place before resuming her pacing, her whole body coiled tight with urgency. Then she threw back her head and roared. It was not the roar of a hunt. It was not the roar of a threat. It rolled out across the flooded river like a wave of pure sound, deep and cracking, carrying over the rain and the wind and the roar of the water itself. Mia had heard tigers roar before, from a distance, safe behind the walls of the ranger station. She had never heard anything like this. It was raw. It was desperate. It shook something loose in her chest. "Ronnie!" Mia breathed. The tigress's amber eyes never left her. Ronnie paced 3 steps one way, 3 steps back, and roared again and again, each call punching through the storm like a fist against a locked door. Kavi pressed himself low to the ground beside her, ears flat, clearly terrified of the water and the noise and the black sky above him. But he did not run either. He stayed at his mother's side, small and shivering, because that was where he belonged. Mia's foot slipped. She caught herself, arms pinwheeling, and looked down to see the water had crept up past her ankles to her shins. The sandbar was shrinking fast now, the current tearing greedy bites from its edges. She had minutes, maybe less. "Keep going," she called across the water, her voice raw and cracking. Ronnie, please, keep going. As if she understood, the tigress roared again, louder this time, the sound tearing out of her chest and rolling down the river valley like thunder chasing thunder. Half a mile downstream, in the sagging canvas tent that served as their search camp, Sam stood hunched over a table littered with soaked maps, his jaw tight, his hands braced against the wood to keep them from shaking. Joseph sat across from him, rain dripping steadily from the brim of his hat, his old face carved with worry he was too tired to hide anymore. "She's not answering," Sam said for the fourth time in 10 minutes, staring at the silent radio. 15 minutes, Joseph. It's been almost 40. I know. Joseph's voice was calm, but his eyes weren't. We'll find her. She knows this river better than anyone. She's out there in the same water that took Danny, Sam said, and his voice cracked clean in half on the last word. He turned away, ran a hand through his soaked hair, and forced himself to breathe. I can't lose her too. Joseph opened his mouth to answer, some steady, grandfatherly reassurance ready on his tongue, when a sound rolled through the tent flap, low and long and impossible to mistake for anything but what it was. Both men went still. Was that? Sam started. Tiger, Joseph said, already on his feet. That's Ronnie. The sound came again, closer this time, or maybe just louder, cutting straight through the drumming rain. It didn't sound like an animal fleeing a flood. It didn't sound like fear for herself. It sounded, Sam realized with a jolt that ran ice down his spine, like a call. A summons. The same urgent, purposeful roaring they'd heard 2 years ago on a QuickSand morning when a mother tiger had backed away from a stranger instead of attacking because she needed help and had no other way to ask for it. She's not running toward the village, Sam said slowly, the pieces falling together in his mind even as his heart hammered against his ribs. She never was. Joseph's eyes met his, and Sam saw the same realization dawning there, sharp and sudden as lightning. She's calling us, Joseph said. Sam, she's telling us where Mia is. Sam was already moving, grabbing his coat, shouting for the others, his boots splashing through the flooded mud toward the sound of that roar rolling steady and unbroken through the storm. The rain came sideways now, needling into Sam's eyes as he ran along the riverbank, his flashlight beam bouncing wildly off the black water. Behind him he could hear the others catching up, boots slapping through mud, someone's voice calling his name. But he didn't stop. He couldn't stop. Ronnie's roar was the only compass he had. This way, he shouted, cutting through a stand of reeds bent flat by the wind. She's close, keep moving. Priya was right behind him, a coil of rescue rope over her shoulder, her teacher's cardigan long since soaked through and forgotten. Joseph came next, moving faster than a man his age had any right to move, his old knees pumping through the mud with a determination that would have made Danny proud, Sam thought, and then shoved the thought away because there wasn't room for it right now. 2 other reserve volunteers followed, carrying planks and more rope, their faces pale and tight in the dark. Ronnie roared again, and this time it was close enough that Sam felt it in his chest, a vibration deeper than sound. Then his flashlight beam swept across the water and caught her. Ronnie stood on the far bank, rigid and soaked, her striped coat plastered dark against her body, Kavi pressed low against her side. She was not pacing anymore. She was staring straight across the river, her whole body pointed like an arrow, and Sam followed the line of her gaze out into the churning black water. There! Priya screamed, pointing. A small island of sand and reeds sat in the middle of the flood, and on it, barely visible, was Mia. She was on her knees, one arm wrapped around a bent sapling that was the last thing keeping her upright, the water surging past her in brown, foaming waves. Even from here, Sam could see the sandbar was dissolving. crumbling away in wet chunks that vanished into the current. "Mia!" Sam's voice tore out of him, raw and desperate. "Mia, hold on!" She looked up. He saw her mouth move, saw her try to call back, but the storm ate the words before they reached him. "We need the rope across now!" Joseph shouted, already unspooling it with shaking hands. "Sam, you're the strongest throw we've got." Sam grabbed the coiled rope, tied it fast around his waist, and a nearby tree with fingers that felt clumsy and slow, and waded into the shallows until the current dragged hard at his knees. He planted his feet, cocked his arm back, and threw. The rope sailed out over the black water and fell short, splashing down 2 feet from the sandbar's crumbling edge. "Again!" Priya yelled, already hauling it back in, hand over hand. "Sam, the current's not going to give us many more tries." Joseph's voice was tight with fear now. All his calm burned away by the sight of the sandbar shrinking under Mia's knees. Sam coiled the rope again, felt the rain running down his face and neck, felt his heart slamming against his ribs, and threw with everything he had. This time it landed across Mia's lap. "Tie it!" Sam bellowed. "Tie it around you, Mia, now!" She moved like she was fighting through water made of lead, her fingers stiff and clumsy from cold. But she looped the rope under her arms and knotted it tight, the same way Danny had taught her years ago, the same way she'd taught half the reserve staff herself. "Pull!" Joseph shouted, and every hand grabbed the line. They hauled together, boots dug into the mud, backs bent against the weight of the current fighting to keep her. The sandbar groaned and split beneath Mia's knees, a long crack opening in the sand, and for one terrible second Sam thought they'd lost her, thought the river would take her the way it had taken Danny. Then she was moving, dragged through the water, gasping, coughing, her arms flailing for purchase as the team reeled her in inch by desperate inch. Her feet found the shallows. Sam let go of the rope and lunged forward, grabbing her under the arms, hauling her the last few feet onto solid ground just as the sandbar behind her gave way entirely, collapsing into the river with a sound like a giant exhaling, swallowed whole by the churning water. Mia collapsed against him, soaked and shaking, coughing river water onto the mud, alive. Across the water, Ronnie watched a moment longer, her amber eyes catching the last of Sam's flashlight beam. Then, with Kavi close at her side, she turned and slipped back into the black tree line, and was gone. Sam held her there in the mud, both of them soaked through, both of them shaking, and for a long moment neither one said anything at all. The rain kept falling, softer now, like the storm had spent its worst on the river and had nothing left to give. Mia's fingers curled into the front of his jacket, gripping the wet fabric like it was the only solid thing left in the world. "I got you," Sam said, his voice cracked and rough. "I got you, Mia. You're safe." She didn't answer. Her whole body trembled, not just from the cold, though the cold was bad, her lips gone pale, and her skin like ice under his hands. Joseph was there a second later, dropping to his knees beside them, pressing his palm to the side of her neck, checking her pulse with the same steady hands that had checked 1,000 animals over the years. "She's freezing," he said. "We need to get her warm now." Priya was already stripping off her own soaked cardigan, wringing it out uselessly before draping it over Mia's shoulders anyway, more for comfort than warmth. The 2 volunteers stood back a few feet, giving space, their faces still tight with the fear of what they'd almost watched happen. But Mia wasn't moving. She sat there in the mud with Sam's arms around her, staring out at the black water where the sandbar used to be, where she had knelt only minutes ago with the current pulling at her knees. "Mia." Sam pulled back just enough to look at her face. Hey, look at me." Her eyes found his, and something in them had cracked open. Something that had been sealed shut for 2 years. "I thought," she started, and her voice broke apart before she could finish. She tried again. "I thought it was going to be like Danny. I thought the river was going to take me too, and I kept thinking, this is how he felt. This is exactly how he felt. And I couldn't do anything. I couldn't save him. I couldn't even save myself. And I just kept thinking about his face, Sam. I kept seeing his face." The name hung in the wet air between them. The first time she had said it out loud, in longer than anyone could remember. Priya's hand flew to her mouth. Joseph went very still. "I sent him," Mia said, and now the words came faster, tumbling out of her like the floodwater had knocked something loose inside her chest. "I sent him to check the gauge. I was the ranger on duty. I was supposed to go, but I had a headache and I asked him to do it instead because he was younger and faster and I thought it wouldn't matter. I thought it was just a stupid gauge, and then the water came up so fast and he never—" She couldn't finish. Her whole body folded forward, and the sound that came out of her wasn't like anything Sam had heard from her before. Not in all the years he'd known her, not even at the funeral, where she had stood dry-eyed and rigid while everyone else wept around her. This was different. This came from somewhere deep and buried, a place she had locked away and never let anyone see, not Sam, not Joseph, not anyone. "Danny," she sobbed, the name breaking apart in her mouth. "Danny, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. It should have been me. It should have been me out there, not you." Sam pulled her into his chest and held on, one hand cradling the back of her head, feeling her tears mix with the rain already soaking his shirt. He didn't tell her it wasn't her fault. He didn't tell her to stop crying. He just held her, the way he had wanted to for 2 long years and never been allowed to, and let her cry until the sobs came softer, until her breathing began to slow. Joseph reached out and rested a weathered hand on her shoulder, saying nothing, his own eyes wet. Priya knelt close on her other side, one arm wrapped around her back. The 2 volunteers stood a respectful distance away, heads bowed, letting her grieve without an audience. The rain kept falling, gentler now, washing the mud and the fear and 2 years of silence off all of them at once. And Mia Alvarez cried for her brother in front of the people who loved her, finally, after so long alone. The sun came back slowly over Cavalli Reserve, like it wasn't quite sure it was welcome yet. 5 days after the flood, the water had dropped low enough that the delta showed its old bones again, cracked mud and bent grass, the river settling back into its banks like it was ashamed of what it had done. Mia sat in the small office at the ranger station, a blanket still draped over her shoulders out of habit more than need. Her hands wrapped around a mug of tea gone cold an hour ago. She hadn't slept much. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw black water, or Danny's face, or both at once, tangled together in a way she was only just starting to untangle. The door opened, and Sam came in, laptop tucked under his arm, Joseph and Priya close behind him. There was something in the way they moved, quick and purposeful, that made Mia sit up straighter. "You need to see this," Sam said. He set the laptop on the table and pulled up a video file. The Forestry Department's search drone had been running the whole night of the flood, sweeping the reserve for any sign of Mia or the missing tigress. Most of the footage had already been reviewed and filed away as useless, just grainy shapes in the storm. But Joseph had asked one of the technicians to go through it again, frame by frame, after Mia told them what she remembered from the sandbar. "Watch," Joseph said quietly. The video was dark and shaky, rain streaking across the lens. But there, unmistakable, was Ronnie. She moved along the ridge above the flooding delta, cub pressed close to her side, pacing back and forth in a tight, deliberate line. Not fleeing toward the village, not running from the storm, circling. "She's not running away," Priya whispered, though she'd already seen it once. "Look how she keeps coming back to the same spot." The drone camera adjusted, catching the reflection of moving water below. And there, small and pale against the dark current, was Mia on her shrinking sandbar. The tigress's head swung toward her every few seconds, ears up, body tensed. And then came the sound, tinny through the laptop speakers but clear enough. A low, rolling growl, aimed not at Mia, but out toward the tree line, toward the direction the rescue team had come from. "She was calling us," Mia said softly. "She wasn't hiding. She was flagging us down." "That's exactly what she was doing." Joseph tapped the screen, pausing on a frame where Ronnie stood in profile, cub tucked against her flank, eyes fixed on the water. A wild tiger, mother of a young cub, choosing to expose herself and her baby, staying in the open during a flood, just to keep watch over a human in danger. That is not aggression. That is not habituation gone wrong. That is protection. Priya was already typing on her phone. "I'm sending this to the district office right now, along with the footage from the original rescue. Let them explain that away." 2 days later, the forestry officials returned to the reserve, the same 3 men in the same stiff uniforms who had first called for Ronnie's capture. But this time, they didn't come with tranquilizer kits or transport cages. They came with a folder of printed reports, and when the senior official, a tired-looking man named Deshmukh, sat down across from Maya, Joseph, and Priya, his face wasn't hard anymore. It was thoughtful. "We reviewed everything," Deshmukh said. "The drone footage, Dr. Bennett's behavioral logs, the camera trap records from the past weeks." He folded his hands on the table. "I won't pretend this wasn't controversial back at the department. Some of my colleagues still think we're taking an unacceptable risk." Mia's jaw tightened, waiting for the rest. "But I've been doing this job 17 years, Deshmukh continued, "and I have never seen anything like what's in that footage. That tigress didn't just tolerate you people. She protected one of you, at real risk to herself and her cub, in the middle of a flood." He opened the folder and slid a single page across the table. "The department is formally reversing the capture order. Effective today, the probationary observation program becomes permanent." Priya let out a breath she'd clearly been holding for days, and Joseph's weathered hand found Mia's shoulder again, the same steady weight it had offered on the riverbank. Deshmukh wasn't finished. He looked directly at Mia. "The department also wants to establish an official liaison position, someone from the reserve responsible for monitoring the tigress and her cub long-term, reporting directly to us." He paused. "Dr. Bennett recommended you for the role. Given everything you've done, and everything you clearly understand about this animal, we're inclined to agree." Mia looked up, throat tight. "Guardian liaison," Deshmukh said, sliding a second paper toward her. "The job is yours, if you want it." 6 months later, the visitor center smelled like fresh paint and cut wood. Mia stood by the front window, watching a family of 4 walk up the gravel path, the kids running ahead of their parents toward the big glass doors. The building was small, just 1 room, really, but Priya had worked wonders with it. Photos lined the walls. There was Ronnie, caught mid-stride through tall grass, her tags catching sunlight. There was Kavi, still small and wobbly-legged, tucked against his mother's side. And there was the photo everyone stopped to look at longest, the one Sam had blown up and framed himself. Ronnie, standing over Sam on that first terrible day, jaws locked around his jacket, hauling him free from the mud. The caption underneath just said 1 word: trust. "Busy day," Sam said, coming up beside her with 2 cups of coffee. He handed her one, and their fingers brushed the way they always did now, easy and unhurried. "Third school group this week," Mia said. "Priya's going to run herself into the ground. She loves it. You know that. Mia did know it. Priya had turned Ronnie's story into something bigger than any of them expected. School programs, a small research grant, even interest from a wildlife documentary crew that had called twice already. The letters from her students, the ones that had started the whole awareness campaign, were framed near the entrance, dozens of crayon tigers and misspelled words about bravery. Mia sipped her coffee and looked at the wall of photos again. 2 years ago, she wouldn't have believed any of this could exist. Not the center, not the calm steadiness in her own chest, and certainly not Sam standing beside her like no time had passed at all. They had rebuilt slowly. No big declarations, no rushed promises. Just small things. Dinner on Tuesdays, long walks along the delta when the light turned gold in the evenings. Sam had learned to wait, and Mia had learned, finally, that letting someone stay didn't mean she'd lose them. "You heading out to check the collar signal?" Sam asked. "Yeah, should be near the old ridge trail." Mia set her cup down. "Come with me?" He smiled, the kind of smile that still made something in her chest loosen. "Thought you'd never ask." They walked out together, past the gravel lot, past the sign Priya had painted by hand. "Cavalli Reserve welcomes you." A small tiger silhouette curled beneath the words. The afternoon sun was already sliding low, painting the tall grass amber and gold. The tracking signal led them along the familiar ridge, past the marker Joseph had planted the day the program became permanent. Mia's boots knew this ground now, every root and rise, the way her hands knew the weight of the receiver clicking softly in her palm. They reached the tree line just as the sun dipped toward the horizon, the sky bruising into soft oranges and purples. Mia lifted the receiver, and there, at the edge of the clearing, where forest met open grass, Ronnie stood watching them. She looked healthy, strong. Her coat caught the last light in streaks of orange and black, and beside her, no longer small or wobbly, stood Kavi. He was nearly her size now, bold and thick-chested, batting at a low branch with a cub's clumsy confidence that was quickly turning into something more sure. Mia went still. Sam's hand found hers, quiet and warm. Ronnie didn't move at first. She simply looked at Mia, the same way she had that very first morning by the QuickSand, that same steady, searching gaze, like she was asking something without words. Mia remembered Danny's voice from years ago. Some animals ask for help if you know how to listen. She thought she finally understood that fully now. Not just about a mother tiger and her cub, about herself, too. About grief that had asked for help in its own quiet, aching way for 2 long years, and about the family, human and wild both, who had answered. Kavi nudged against his mother's side, restless, ready to move. Ronnie held Mia's gaze one more moment, something steady and grateful passing between them. And then she turned. Mother and cub moved together into the deepening shadows of the trees, unhurried, sure of themselves, until the green swallowed them whole and the forest closed soft and quiet behind them. Mia stood there a long moment, Sam's hand still in hers, the receiver silent now in her other palm. She felt the ache in her chest, the old one that had lived there so long, settle into something gentler. Not gone, just healed enough to hold. She smiled, quiet and full, and let out a slow breath into the evening air. I hope you like this story. Please share what's your favorite part of the story, and where in the world you are watching from. Have a wonderful day.